He's deceased, boss. The truck's in the middle of the road.
He's dead?
Yes, sir. Brains are on the road.
And he was shot. Did you see the person who shot him?
Yeah, we pulled up. There's a whole, yes.
Who? Okay, which way did the vehicle go?
Headed towards New Milford, down Route 7.
Down Route
south.
7?
You, Anthony John Todt, are a destroyer of worlds. That you destroyed the world of your 4-year-old daughter, Zoe Elizabeth Todt. That you destroyed the world of your 10-year-old son, Tyler John Todt. That you destroyed the world of your 13-year-old son, Alexander John Todt. That you destroyed the world of your wife, Megan Denise Todt.
Did you kill your wife, Anna? I haven't harmed my wife or my daughter. I haven't harmed either of them.
People that take the lives of innocent women and children are among some of the most evil to ever exist. But there is something especially tragic about fathers who take the lives of their own family members. Fathers are supposed to be protectors. They are supposed to do whatever is necessary to take care of their wife and kids. But the fathers in these stories are the ones that ended up being the true danger. The following stories tell the tale of 3 horrific family murders that were so awful they disgusted the whole world.
He killed his baby and he's in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby? Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name?
This tragic and disturbing case began back in 1996 when Stephen Plattel was 20 years old. He began talking to a girl online whose name was Alyssa. Alyssa was only 15, so not only was their relationship pretty creepy, but it was super illegal. The two met online and began talking. Even though there was an obvious age difference and the two lived far apart, with Stephen being from New York and Alyssa living in San Antonio, Texas, they became serious about one another pretty quickly. If Alyssa's parents knew that their minor daughter was talking to a man she had never met who was 5 years older than her, they didn't try to stop her. By the time Alyssa was just 16, Stephen had already managed to convince her to come to New York to live with him. Not long after Alyssa and Stephen began living together, Alyssa discovered that she was pregnant. She was now just 17 years old when she gave birth to a baby girl who she and Stephen named Denise. It was around this time that things in this little family began to get pretty disturbing. Alyssa allegedly saw Stephen their newborn daughter, at times pinch her hard enough to leave bruises on her skin. Other times, Stephen would put the tiny baby in a cooler and leave her there. Can you imagine leaving your family and moving across the country to be with a man and have his baby, only to find out he was a total monster? That's what happened to Alyssa. She knew that if she didn't do something drastic, her baby might end up dying at the hands of her own father. It was then that she knew she would have to make one of the most painful decisions ever for the sake of saving her baby. She put Denise up for adoption, but luckily Denise was soon adopted and brought into a loving and happy family home where it looked like she was going to be able to enjoy a pretty normal life in Dover, New York. The adoptive parents renamed the baby Katie, and that was the name she was known by as she grew up. By her teenage years, Katie was a talented artist who planned to soon be heading off to college. Her future looked very bright, but nobody could have expected the disturbing turn that her life would later take. While Katie was off living a normal life, Alyssa and Stephen had ended up having 2 more children, both daughters. Things hadn't really improved between the two at all, and Stephen had continued with his behavior. He had a horrible temper, and according to Alyssa, he would often destroy things in the home when he got angry. Sometimes he would even punch holes in the wall. Stephen was not a good father, but he was an even worse husband. He couldn't keep a job and didn't help Alyssa support the family, so it was up to her to work and take care of the children, all while doing the best that she could to keep Stephen happy. This was no easy task. She would later say that she often felt like she was always walking on eggshells around Stephen. She was always trying to keep him happy so that he wouldn't have a tantrum and start breaking things in front of the kids. Like many young people that are adopted, Katie would eventually get curious about who her birth parents were. She used the internet to track them down and began speaking with them. While it's not exactly clear what they talked about, Katie's birth parents made such a major impression on her that she decided to change her future plans completely. Instead of going to art school, she decided to move in with them and their 2 daughters in Virginia. When Katie's adoptive parents found out about her change of plans, they were very concerned. But they decided that because their daughter was 18 years old and could make her own decisions, they couldn't really stop her. It wasn't long after Katie moved in with Stephen and Alyssa that Alyssa noticed that there was something strange going on between the 2 of them. Katie and Stephen were unusually close, and Stephen seemed to be doing everything he could to look younger. He shaved his beard and started dressing differently. Alyssa believed that he had begun doing these things because he wanted to impress Katie. Considering the fact that he was Katie's dad, this thought is pretty disturbing. Alyssa would call Stephen on his behavior, and he would always deny it. Worried about how close Stephen and Katie seemed to be getting, Alyssa decided that Katie deserved to know the truth about her dad, and so she told her everything. She told her about the horrible ways Stephen used to her when she was a baby. She also told her how Stephen had been her too throughout their relationship. Most people would be horrified to hear these sorts of things about their father. Many people probably wouldn't even want anything more to do with him, but Katie seemed totally unfazed by it all. And if anything, her and Stephen just kept getting closer. From then on, things just kept getting more and more creepy between Stephen and Katie. Instead of sleeping with his wife in their bed, he began sleeping on the same floor as Katie. When Alyssa asked him about why he felt the need to do this, he would just get mad and storm out of the house. Alyssa had a feeling that something really weird was going on. She just didn't know quite what it was. The reality was more disturbing than anyone could have dreamed up, because Stephen and Katie, although they were father and daughter, had fallen in love. Stephen and Katie began a secret relationship without Alyssa knowing. Meanwhile, Stephen and Alyssa got a divorce and agreed to shared custody of their 2 daughters. The children, along with Stephen and Katie, would continue living at home, and Alyssa would move out. Now that Alyssa was no longer living at the home, Stephen and Katie could carry on with their relationship without even having to hide it. Alyssa ended up finding out about Stephen and Katie's relationship in pretty much one of the most disturbing ways possible. She read about it in her 11-year-old daughter's journal. Check out this disturbing entry. Basically, the 11-year-old had written that her dad had told her to stop calling Katie her sister and start calling her stepmom instead. Katie is my sister. She's probably his wife now, the entry reads. But that's not all. The 11-year-old had also noticed something else. Katie had begun gaining weight very quickly. It didn't take long for Alyssa to put 2 and 2 together. Stephen had impregnated his own daughter. Alyssa immediately began to freak out. She called Stephen and demanded to know the truth. She asked him if Katie was pregnant with his baby, and he simply replied, "I thought you knew." Because what they were doing was illegal, Alyssa called the authorities to report them. When law enforcement looked into the family and even questioned the 2 children, neither Katie nor Stephen were arrested at the time. But just being together wasn't enough for Stephen and Katie. They wanted to get married. They decided to have a ceremony done in Maryland. While it's obviously not allowed in the United States for a father to marry his own daughter, the 2 lied about their relationship. But here is the real shocking thing about this disturbing wedding ceremony. Katie's adoptive parents, Anthony and Kelly Fusco, had not only been invited, but showed up to celebrate with them. They were even all photographed together, as if they were totally fine with the daughter that they raised being in this creepy and disgusting relationship with her own dad. On September 1st of 2017, Katie gave birth to the baby. It was a little boy who she named Bennett. But it didn't take long before their little bubble of love and happiness burst. Law enforcement found out about the illegal marriage, and both Katie and Stephen were arrested and extradited to Virginia. Court-issued tests determined that Katie and Stephen were in fact father and daughter. Stephen's defense tried to say that things weren't as gross as they actually sounded because Stephen had never really known Katie until she was nearly clearly an adult, and that because they were related, it was only natural that they shared a bond. He ended up making bail and getting out of jail. However, he was not supposed to have any contact at all with Katie and baby Bennett and was to be put in the care of Stephen's 72-year-old mother, Grace. Meanwhile, Katie, who at this time was only 20 years old, was also later released from custody, but ordered to have no contact at all with Stephen. She decided to move back to New York and live with her adoptive parents while she tried to figure out how to put her life back together. Around that time, Katie must have finally come to her senses because she ended up calling Stephen, even though she wasn't allowed to, and told him that she wanted to end the relationship. Stephen didn't take the news well at all. In fact, he immediately made an evil plan to get revenge. He went to his mother's house to pick up baby Bennett. He told her he was taking the baby to go see Katie. Grace didn't hesitate to hand the baby over, all the while having no clue what horrible things were in store for the defenseless child. After leaving, Stephen put his hands around little Bennett's neck and killed him. He must have decided that if he wasn't going to be allowed to have custody of the baby, he wasn't going to let Katie have him either. But he wasn't finished yet. He then headed off to the home of Katie's adoptive parents, Anthony and Kelly Fusco. This was the home where Katie had been staying. Stephen sat outside the home for a long time, just waiting for an opportunity. Eventually, Anthony and Katie leave the home to get into Anthony's truck. They were completely unaware that Stephen was lurking in the shadows, just waiting to attack them. Stephen grabbed a weapon and began firing into the vehicle, striking both of them. He was unleashing all of his anger on them at that moment, not caring what happened next. A passerby saw the whole thing and called 911.
Someone just went by and shot this guy in the truck.
Somebody in a truck on Route 55, sir?
Yes, we're getting Route 55 and Route 7. It just happened. I'm a fireman out in New York. The car pulled up, went around him, shot him, whole clip full into his head.
It was clear to the caller that this was a very serious situation. He knew that Anthony, who had been driving the vehicle, was dead.
He's deceased, boss. The truck's in the middle of the road.
He's dead?
Yes, sir. Brains are on the road.
And he was shot. Did you see the person who shot him?
Yeah, we pulled up. There's a whole, yes.
Who? Okay, which way did the vehicle go?
Headed towards New Milford, down Route 7.
Down Route
south.
7?
The caller did not know yet that there was someone else inside the vehicle, Katie. Sadly, she was also dead. Just a short time later, 911 would receive another disturbing phone call. This one was from Stephen's mother, Grace. She told the dispatcher that her son had just called her and made a horrible confession.
My son just called me, and he told me oh my God. He killed his baby, and he's in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby? Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name?
Grace was understandably distressed and in complete shock.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
He's not home. His wife broke up with him over the phone yesterday, and he told me she's in New York, and he told me he was on his way. He called me last night and said he's on his way. He's going to bring the baby to her.
But she now knew that her son had never taken baby Bennett to Katie.
He said he killed his wife, he killed her father, and I can't even believe this is happening.
Okay. And did this happen in Nightdale?
No, his wife and father are in New York.
As far as Grace had known, her son was just taking the baby to go see his mother. She had no idea that a horrific tragedy had been about to occur.
He left last night. He called me, I forget, maybe about 7 last night, and said he was on his way to New York. He was going to bring to his wife and give it to her, and then he'd be back.
But Stephen would never be back home again. While on the phone, Stephen didn't tell Grace about how he had killed Bennett, Katie, and Anthony. He only told her not to go over to the house because he didn't want her to see the horrible things he had done.
I didn't ask him. I didn't want to know. Oh my God. He's such a wonderful little boy.
Okay, hold on just a second, okay?
Law enforcement rushed over to Stephen's home and soon found baby Bennett's lifeless body. Not long after, they discovered Stephen as well. He was dead, slumped behind the wheel of the family minivan after taking his own life. It was the end of a tragedy that had destroyed two families forever. When Alyssa later heard what had happened to Stephen and Katie, she was horrified.
Hearing that he murdered her and the baby and the father, it took the wind out of me. I was just sobbing. I was weakened. I felt like I was falling apart.
But she was also not surprised that the violent person she knew had committed such atrocious acts.
He was verbally, emotionally, and mentally throughout our 20 years together. Did do many violent things. He had nearly beat to death one cat and did to death another cat. He would go long periods of time of not talking to his family. He was extremely isolated.
Alyssa felt mixed emotions about the whole ordeal. While she was in distraught over the innocent lives lost, she was glad that Stephen was finally gone forever.
To be quite frank, it's been a difficult roller coaster of emotions because I am so devastated by the loss of Katie and her adoptive dad and baby. But it is such a relief to know that I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore to see if Steve is there.
Stephen will never be able to hurt any other innocent people ever again.
I am thankful for the children that I have from him, that I still have today. Outside of that, I did feel for a very long time that he was not a person that was very deserving to be on this earth anymore.
Anthony Todt is waking up behind bars this morning, where he'll remain for the rest of his life.
After hours of deliberation, the jury did finally find him guilty of murdering his entire family.
This is the disturbing story of Anthony Todt, a man who appeared to everyone else to be a loving husband and father. Anthony and his wife Megan were both physical therapists who lived in the beautiful city of Celebration, Florida, with their 3 children, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe. From the outside looking in, the Todt family seemed to be just like any other normal family, but there were a lot of dark secrets that were unearthed that would shock and disturb the whole world. It was a pretty typical day for Anthony to go out of town on business, while Megan stayed home with the kids. He was usually pretty good about making his appointments with his patients, but around Thanksgiving of 2019, Anthony did not show up for work. He told his patients that Megan was sick and he would need to reschedule his appointments so that he could stay home and take care of her. This didn't seem out of the ordinary, but as days passed by and still nobody heard from either Anthony or Megan, people started to get worried.
I'm wondering if somebody can do a wellness check on my brother and his family. They've been really sick for probably like the past week and a half. And I can't seem to get a hold of them.
Anthony's sister ended up calling law enforcement to go and check on the family. She knew that the family had been sick, but was starting to wonder if something else had been going on.
You said they were sick or something like that. You mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, they've been really sick. I guess they've had the flu. But they've had the flu probably for a couple weeks.
Law enforcement did end up going to the Todt family home to check on them, but nobody came to answer the door, and the house appeared to be missing. So officers ended up leaving. But the weeks continued to pass, and still nobody heard from Anthony or his wife. Concerned family members decided to do some digging of their own and see if there could be something more going on, and it wasn't long until they made some unsettling discoveries. Anthony was in legal trouble due to some of his business activities at his physical therapy practice. In fact, he was being investigated for insurance fraud and was on the run from the FBI. It was then that they knew that Anthony wasn't sick, he was hiding. But this was just the beginning of horrific discoveries that were about to come. Law enforcement went to Anthony's house once again, but this time he wasn't hiding. He was just sitting on the front porch as if everything was normal. While he was handcuffed and brought into custody, other officers went into the family home, and what they found was nothing short of nightmarish. The entire family, including Megan, their 3 children, and even the dog, were dead, and they appeared to have been dead for weeks. Anthony was charged with each of the murders.
I'm Osceola County Sheriff Russ Gibson, and I wanted to give you the latest update on the death investigation that occurred at 202 Reserve Place in Celebration.
It was the news that shocked not only the community of Celebration, Florida, but the entire nation.
Deputies made contact with Anthony in the home, along with federal agents, and he was immediately detained. A safety check of the home was conducted where deputies discovered 4 deceased individuals inside. The home was immediately secured and a search warrant was obtained by our detectives.
While he was in custody, Anthony ended up admitting to law enforcement that he had killed his entire family. But what could have possibly been his motivation? It seemed to all be connected to the investigation with his physical therapy practice that he had been hiding from his wife for a while. Had all of his secrets become too much to keep up with? Anthony went to trial in September of 2021. Even though he had already confessed to the murders, he ended up totally changing his story. Now he claimed not to be able to remember a single thing that happened. He kept up this charade when even talking with his own family. Listen to this jailhouse phone call between Anthony and his sister Christy.
What's up, Cheese
It's good to hear your voice.
I've been held in isolation and I still am.
Are you okay?
And I don't remember anything pretty much over Christmas and the first week I got here. I don't remember coming here. I don't remember anything after the events would happen, all that kind of stuff. I have no idea where I was, where I am.
It's not hard to see through Anthony's whole amnesia act. Who would believe a guy who says he just conveniently forgets the day he murdered his whole family? The people he really has to convince is the jury, who will be deciding whether or not he is guilty. While in custody waiting for the trial to move forward, Anthony had a lot of time on his hands. In fact, he had so much time that he seemed to come up with a whole new story about what happened to his family. He penned a long letter to his dad saying that it was his wife, Megan, who was the real killer. He said that Megan was suffering from depression and that she killed the kids before taking her own life. This was an easy lie for the prosecution to break down because it was clear from Megan's wounds that there was no way she could have caused them herself. But Anthony decided to stick to his story anyway. In a crazy twist during the trial, Anthony came forward to testify on his own behalf. He talked about his wife's supposed struggle with depression and recalled a time from the past which he claims Megan tried to hurt herself.
Talking about your own demeanor and how your countenance.
My own demeanor, when I found out what happened, I puked. I cried. I was in total denial of what happened. I couldn't understand. And then after that, I was like, I want to get you help.
Instead of looking at the attorney, who is asking him the questions in court, Anthony keeps turning and looking directly at the jury. It's as if he wants to do everything he can to convince them that he's being genuine with his answers, and he truly cares about his wife.
I would do anything in my life to do what she needed, provide for what she needed, provide her a happy life. I held my wife on a pedestal. I didn't care anything to myself. I wanted her to have a good life. Period. And I wanted her to get help.
With a tear streaming down his face, Anthony insisted that he had no idea that Megan would ever do something like this, and that this was the biggest blindside he had ever experienced in his whole life.
I had no knowledge of this. I don't know what could have prevented it. I have no idea. And that's the biggest thing that affects me, is the fact that I didn't even see this coming. They say, blindsided. This was a blindside by like a Mack truck filled with dynamite.
Finally, Anthony's fate was placed into the hands of the jury. Would they believe his sob story or convict him of murder?
State of Florida versus Anthony John Tote. Verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. Verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
The jury ended up finding Anthony guilty on each and every count of murder. They also found him guilty of animal cruelty for killing the family dog. As each guilty verdict was read aloud, he could be seen shaking his head, either in disbelief or disappointment. When the day of his sentencing finally arrived, Anthony had the opportunity to take responsibility for once, but instead he continued to claim he was innocent.
I love my wife. I love my children. I was not there the night my children died.
But the judge had no sympathy for Anthony and didn't hesitate before throwing the book at him.
You, Anthony John Todt, are a destroyer of worlds, that you destroyed the world of your 4-year-old daughter, Zoe Elizabeth Todt, that you destroyed the world of your 10-year-old son, Tyler John Todt, that you destroyed the world of your 13-year-old son, Alexander John Todt, that you destroyed the world of your wife, Megan Denise Todt.
Because the prosecution had decided not to pursue making Anthony pay with his life for the murders, the judge gave him the next most severe sentence that he possibly could under the law.
You are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Even though the sentencing is over, and Anthony now knows that he will be living out the rest of his life behind bars, he still has not taken responsibility or explained why he did what he did.
Did you kill your wife, Anna? I haven't harmed my wife or my daughter. I haven't harmed either of them.
This is a particularly disturbing case that took place in Australia in March of 2004. It's about the Sharp family, a family of 3 that seemed to be full of happiness and love, but it was ultimately destroyed in the most disturbing way. John Sharp met his beautiful wife, Anna Kemp, through work at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. They married and had an adorable daughter named Gracie. But like any family, their lives were not without struggles. Gracie was born with a health condition called hip dysplasia. Because of this, she would need treatment and a special harness to help correct her skeletal structure. Even after getting treatment, Gracie's condition still made it hard for her to sleep and eat at times. Gracie's health struggles reportedly put a strain on John and Anna's marriage and caused a lot of stress. Gracie was just a little over a year old when Anna discovered that she was pregnant again. This second pregnancy came as a shock to both her and John, but John took the news especially badly. He apparently hadn't wanted another child because of all of Gracie's special needs. As Anna's pregnancy progressed, John found himself getting more and more angry. He resented both Anna and her unborn baby, even viewing the newly expected baby as a burden. His anger got so out of control that on March 21st of 2004, he ended up doing the unthinkable. It started as an entirely normal day. The family had attended a child's birthday party, and everything seemed to be fine between the couple. They weren't arguing, and things didn't appear tense. But that night, after they lay down to bed and Anna had gone to sleep, John laid awake, stewing. He thought about the unborn baby and the state that his marriage was in. He stewed and stewed until eventually he could not take it anymore. He got out of bed and went to retrieve a deadly weapon from the garage that would typically be used for fishing. He brought the weapon upstairs and used it to kill Anna while she slept. He covered up her body and went to sleep on the couch downstairs. And then, as if what he hadn't done wasn't already horrible enough, John makes up a lie about Anna, claiming that she had been unfaithful.
He then concocts an elaborate lie, claiming she's left him for another man.
Anyone who knows the whereabouts of Anna, please contact the police.
For several days after Anna's murder, John kept taking little Gracie to daycare, like normal. But then on March 27th, he decided he wanted the toddler out of the picture as well. So after Gracie fell asleep that night, he went into her room and killed her, using the same weapon he used to kill Anna. In the months afterward, John would claim that Anna and Gracie had both disappeared and that he had no idea where they went. He did several televised news interviews in which he tearfully claimed to miss his wife and daughter and that he loved them a lot. Many people found John's behavior to be pretty bizarre. They also noticed that when he talked about Anna and Gracie, he would often use the past tense. This led many to suspect that he knew they were both dead and that he was behind their murders. Law enforcement caught John on surveillance footage trying to discard some of his wife's belongings, including her credit cards. The weight of what he had done must have eventually become too much for John to bear, because he ended up confessing to everything. He said that he had killed Anna because his marriage was so unhappy and he couldn't take it anymore. He said that he had never planned on killing Gracie, but ended up losing sight of everything while caught up in the moment. John was sentenced to 2 life sentences with no parole. Because there are so many prisoners that have threatened to kill him due to his horrific crimes, John has to remain in protective custody at all times. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.